Hey everybody, and welcome to Autumn Leigh at Home. I'm Autumn Leigh if you're new to the channel. Today we are going to work on baking and meal prepping for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is this Thursday and we just have a lot of meal prep to get through. So this week I'm gonna bring you guys along with me as we meal prep things that we can prepare ahead of time.
When I know I have multiple parties coming up or even a party with a large number of guests, I try to meal plan accordingly and choose items on my menu that are going to be things that I can prepare ahead of time or things that I know that I can prepare even though it's a large quantity. I can make them ahead of time to not only save money but also effort on the day of. Some of the items I'm hoping to prepare ahead of time with you guys are these yummy buttery yeast dinner rolls, as well as some strawberry swirl and Oreo cheesecake bites. And last but not least, chocolate oatmeal cookies. First up, we are going to make our butter dinner rolls. And y'all, these are amazing. My kids absolutely love them. My husband loves them. I ended up making 38 of these after making a quadruple batch. And my thought behind that was to hope to make enough for our Friendsgiving as well as our family Thanksgiving. And after doing the numbers, I realized I needed to probably take all of them to Friendsgiving, and we ended up eating all of them. So I will be making more later this week, and I'm so happy that everybody loved them. Y'all definitely need to try this. I will put the recipe down in the description. The recipe that I'm using in the description, I doubled it and then made it twice, made a double batch twice, meaning I made quadruple batch total. And so when I tell you the ingredients, it's going to be doubled from the recipe you read in the description. First, we're going to start with 2 cups of milk, and I'm going to add a cup of water to the milk. Then I want to warm the water up to put our yeast in it because we don't want to put yeast in cold liquid. It won't activate that well. So you want to make sure that it gets up to about 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and then take it out and add 2 tablespoons of active dry yeast. I also needed to warm up my honey because it had crystallized. If you have crystallized honey, do not throw it out. It's completely fine. All you have to do is warm it up a little bit and it will go right back down to liquid and make it super easy to pour as well. But I used 4 tablespoons of honey, then 4 tablespoons of melted butter. Once you've added the melted butter, you can take a little whisk or a spoon, whatever you have, the end of the knife that is laying there, it doesn't matter. Just gently kind of stir it around. You're not trying to completely incorporate all the ingredients. Ultimately, I'm just trying to get all of the active dry yeast kind of in the liquid. I want to make sure it's kind of even throughout. And then I want to find a warm place to put this measuring cup.
I'm gonna place it in the microwave to let it kind of come up and get nice and bubbly and let the yeast activate. I just like to find a warm spot in my house, and the microwave's the perfect place because we just used it to warm up the butter and kind of melt it as well. I'm not gonna start it or anything. I don't wanna turn it on. All I wanna do is let it sit in a warm environment to allow the yeast to activate. While that is activating, I'm gonna go ahead and start on round 2 of the yeast rolls. I don't like to do more than 2 batches at one time in one bowl just because I'm afraid it will mess up the ingredients. So we're going to do 4 batches because I doubled one batch. So that means if I do another doubled batch, that's 4 total, because we have 2 Thanksgiving get-togethers this week. One is tomorrow, and then one is, of course, on Thanksgiving Day with family. So we want to make sure that we have enough yeast rolls for both of those. And to do that, I'm going to make a quadruple batch, but separate them in 2 separate rises and 2 separate mixes. So we'll get started on second one now.
I definitely did not make enough dinner rolls. As I said before, I know I said in this video I was hoping to use them for both the Friendsgiving as well as the Thanksgiving, but I'm really happy that everybody enjoyed them, and I really don't mind making them again, so I will make more later on this week. Here, I am just mixing all of the exact same ingredients as you saw before for the second batch. I'm just copying it all over again. Again, this is a double batch, and I will put in the description this recipe. It is by Becky at Acre Homestead, and we absolutely love it.
I got a clean tablespoon because I used my last one for the honey, and I'll use it again in just a moment. But here is our yeast. There's 1 tablespoon, 2. It's literally just the same thing over again. And now we're finished with the yeast, so I'm going to stick this back in the freezer here in a moment and put this in. And then I'll mix the then I'll mix the butter in as well. I'm just mixing up all of the ingredients, and then I'm gonna put this in the microwave with the other one. The other one is pretty much finished rising, and I'll show you what it looks like. But I still need to mix out the flour and salt really quick, and then we can add all of the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients. Look at that. Look how much it has risen. It was right here, now it's all the way right here. And it's nice and bubbly and active. That's what we wanna see. So I need to get our flour mixed and salt, and then we can pour this into it. I have our bread flour here. And I know if you've been following along with me for a little while, you know, but I keep my flour and a lot of my larger ingredients in these 5-pound buckets, and it works so well. And you can get these super cheap, just fun fact, from Walmart for $1 from the bakery section. They are obviously gently used in the bakery, but they sell them and you can easily wash them out, and they're food grade buckets for just $1. They do come with a lid as well. I buy these Gamma lids right here because I like how they screw on and off very easily, and they keep your food nice and safe from any critters. I'm gonna put 7 to 8 cups of bread flour in here. You can use, the recipe calls for all-purpose flour, but because I have bread flour, I'm gonna go ahead and use it because that's what this is for. We're baking yeast rolls, which is bread. So I'm gonna use 7 to 8 cups of bread flour, put it in here, and then we will put 2 teaspoons of salt. I'm gonna start off with 7 cups because I can always add another cup later if the dough is too wet, but I can't take it out if it's too dry. So what we're gonna do is start with 7 cups, and we will see what the dough looks like before we add another cup. I have my teaspoon and my salt. So I'm gonna go ahead and add 2. Whoop, I'm running low on salt. I might need to add more to it here in a moment. 1, 2. And again, I know we're doing a quadruple batch, but my mixer wouldn't be able to handle 4, like a quadruple batch. So I'm just gonna I'm hoping it can handle a double batch. I'm going to do 2 double batches, and this is 1. So I'll do 7 cups again in a minute. So I'm gonna maybe refill my salt here in a minute too. Now that the flour and salt is just slightly mixed up, look how pretty it has risen. Those are beautiful bubbles. So we're going to go ahead and pour this in slowly while this mixer is on, and that way it can all mix slowly together. It looks like I'm probably going to end up putting in that extra flour, but let me scrape down the edges because a lot of times that makes a big difference, is just doing that little step, and then you can actually see it coming together. Because see all that dry flour at the bottom? That still needs to get mixed in, so we should be okay, but I may need to add another, even if it's just a tablespoon of flour at a time, because I don't want to make the dough too dense, because that means our bread would be extra dense as well.
While my first batch of dough is kneading in the mixer, I go ahead and get 2 bowls out and lightly grease them with some olive oil. That way when our dough is finished, we are able to take it out, put them in the bowls to rise, and it doesn't actually stick to the bottom of the bowl. I want to take this time to encourage you, if you are new to baking or cooking or food preservation, any of those things, I know it can be super scary to try something new, but it can also be super satisfying. I don't believe that you have to have everything made from scratch. You can buy things from the store while learning new recipes. Sometimes I like to give myself a goal of trying 1 new thing a week. That way I'm not completely overwhelmed. If that's even too much for you, try 1 new recipe every other week. Just do it on a day that you have a little bit of extra time. And that way you slowly build these skills over time. And now back to the recipe.
See how it's starting to pull away from the edges? That's what we want to see. So a few minutes ago, I felt like it was a little too wet, so I added a little less than half a cup more. And now it's starting to pull away from the edges. It's clumping in one whole big mass, which is what we want to see. So that's looking much better. I think we're pretty much ready to put it in our greased bowl.
I did end up letting it knead for a little bit longer because I wanted a more smooth texture where the gluten is even more organized. And you can tell the more organized the gluten is, the more smooth the texture of the dough will be. And once I got a little bit more of a smooth texture, I went ahead and greased my hands up a little bit. So I took a little bit of the oil from the bowl and put it on my hands so that it was easier to get it off of the dough hook out of the bowl. And I took the dough out of the bowl, formed it kind of into a ball shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then just plopped it down into the greased bowl. You want to try to find somewhere warm for this to sit. So usually, again, I sometimes put it in the microwave. That just makes me nervous. Or even if you have an oven light and you put it in your oven or a proof setting in the oven, I will strongly encourage you to be extra careful with this because I totally forgot I was proofing dough one time and turned my oven on broil and almost caught my house on fire. So just make sure, maybe put a visual reminder there for yourself to know that there is something in the oven before you turn it on, or just have the routine of checking your oven every time you go ahead and preheat it. That way you don't run into the same issue I did. That was definitely a lesson learned not to do that. But once we roll this in, put it in the bowl, try to find a warm place. I usually now, instead of putting it in the oven, I put it on top of the stove and put a towel over it just so that it can rise in a warm place. And you want to see it double in size. And then we do all of those steps all over again to make our second batch of dough. Then it's time to preheat our oven. Don't worry, there is nothing in there, and we preheat it at 400 degrees. While the oven is preheating, it is time to go ahead and divide our rolls out. And I called in the troops for this. And they absolutely love to help because that means their reward is getting to eat a dinner yeast roll early before dinner. And who doesn't like playing with dough? They absolutely love this. They usually ask to help each time. Now, it does get a little bit messy, but it's actually a lot easier of a cleanup than you think it is. I also want to point out that I wash the counters really well before we do this, and I make sure that everybody washes their hands really well as well. Now it's time to dive into the flour, and you can tell that they all love that part. Here, I'm signing to my son. I'm using ASL because he is deaf, and I'm telling him you don't want to use too much flour because the more flour you add to the dough, the more dense the roll will be and the bread will be. It's important to only try to use the flour to keep the dough from sticking to your hands or the counter. And here I'm also signing to my son in ASL that each person gets to punch the dough down one time. The recipe actually says to do that, you're supposed to punch the dough down. So, again, this is one of their favorite things to do. Once we get all of the dough punched down, you don't only want to do it a few times. You don't have to punch it all the way down. Just do it a few times, and then you pour the dough out onto the lightly floured surface. And then I'm going to separate, because this is a double batch. Typically, I would be able to get about, I would say, maybe 12 small or to medium sized yeast dinner rolls out of one batch. So you should be able to get about 24 rolls out of a double batch. This does not have to be perfect. I am not doing this at all perfectly. I think I just keep dividing. So first I divide it in half and then I divide it in fourths until I get to about a rough estimate of 24 dinner rolls. I think I ended up with this batch actually doing less than that, and I accidentally, you'll see later on, made some of them quite large, and I should have halved them even further. And I don't really know what I was thinking. I think we were just having fun and they were enjoying doing this together. So I just slightly got distracted, and I could have and should have made them a lot smaller than I did. So the largest one my son ate. Jacob got the biggest one out of the batch, and it was huge. And that is okay. He absolutely loved it. The other large ones, I ended up freezing about 6 of the massive ones. So I guess we didn't end up eating all of them at the Friendsgiving, but I did save 6 of the larger ones because I was slightly embarrassed to take them to the Friendsgiving for everybody to share. And I'm going to end up using those as buns for sloppy joes. I have them in the freezer so that they are safe and good to go. I'll just pull them out of the freezer whenever I need them. And these rolls do freeze really well. So, again, if you want to make them ahead of time to actually freeze them and then thaw them the day of, just maybe pull them out the night before the gathering or the get together or the party. And that way they are thawed and fully ready for the party for people to enjoy. If you do choose to freeze them, I would recommend to plan to put them in the oven, maybe wrap them in a little bit of aluminum foil, put them in the oven so that they can heat up and warm up throughout. That just makes them that much better. But if you don't have to do that. It's just a recommendation to make them taste even better. I also want to point out that I know it looks like we just have a beautiful, happy family and everything's going beautifully and easy. However, there were a few frustrated moments by the kids that they just got a little bit of frustrated. And out of respect for them, I don't want to show those clips. But there were a couple of times where they got frustrated that they couldn't roll it exactly perfect or they couldn't get it exactly right. And I just try to encourage them that it doesn't have to be perfect. This is a learning curve. It will turn out tasting great. Nobody expects them to learn or know how to do it perfectly the first time around. It takes time to learn these things. And obviously, I just tried to show you what they looked like, and they all rolled forward. So, you live, you learn. Having company to do those tasks definitely makes it go by a lot faster, and you enjoy that company and time together. Now that we are finished rolling out the dinner rolls, I take a dampened paper towel. You don't want it dripping wet, just slightly dampened, and put it over, lightly drape it over the pan of dinner rolls and set it in a warm place for them to rise and allow them to almost double in size. They'll get nice and puffy, and it's time to start on the second batch. We get to do all of those steps all over again, and as you can tell, they are not complaining about it because they absolutely love getting to do this part. So we just literally do everything again. We divide all of the rolls, roll them out. One of the ways that you is best to roll the each individual dinner roll out is by taking the ball and pinching each side up and towards the center and then rotating it and continuing to pinch each dough piece, kind of pulling it out and pinching it up towards the center and then rolling it in your hand to organize that gluten. You will feel the dough become even stiffer, and that is okay. That's what you want. That means the gluten in the dough is organizing, and you will put the pinch side down on the tray and allow it to proof that way. Before putting the dinner rolls on there, I do put a piece of parchment paper down and I spray it lightly with nonstick spray. This just allows it to not stick to the pan, or it makes it a lot easier for the dinner rolls to come up later on.
The quadruple batch is now resting, and I'm allowing them to rise for about 30 minutes, and then we will get them in the oven. And before I do that though, I do want to put an egg wash on them. And that's one egg with 1 teaspoon or tablespoon of water mixed with the egg, and you scramble it and then just brush it on the top. Now I'm going to clean my kitchen because it is looking pretty rough.
Before I continue, I just wanted to kind of pause while these were rising and get my kitchen cleaned up. It was starting to drive me nuts, and I've learned in the past that when it does that, I just stop enjoying the actual baking process because I feel overwhelmed with all of the chaos of the kitchen. So I usually at that time go ahead and just pause, find a stopping point, and try to kind of reset the kitchen. I know many of you guys out there were probably panicking when I was sprinkling the flour all over my countertop. It really is not hard to clean up. I know if you try to spray it or wipe it up with a wet cloth, it can be a little messy, but if you get this bench scraper and just scrape the countertop off, get all of the flour off with the bench scraper first, and I usually just use the bowl that I was using to mix the dough in, and scrape it straight into the bowl, dump it in the trash, and then I'm able to easily go through with cleaner spray and wipe all the countertops back down. And it's really a piece of cake. I have granite countertops. If you have, say, tiled counters, that would be totally different. I would not do it on a tiled counter. That would be a nightmare to try to clean. But if you, like me, have granite countertops or something similar, then a bench scraper is going to be your best friend. While our oven was preheating to 400 degrees Fahrenheit, we were allowing our dough, our rolls that are already rolled out, to rise and somewhat double in size, or at the very least get a little bit bigger. And of course, again, like before, you want to try to find a warm place. And usually you want to allow them to rise for about 30 minutes. Now that it's been about 30 minutes, it's time to go ahead and put the egg wash on them. All I did was took 1 to 2 eggs, and however many eggs you want to put, 1 tablespoon of water per egg. So because I used 2 eggs, I put 2 tablespoons of water, then scrambled the eggs with the water and gently brushed it across the top of the dinner roll. This is what gives the dinner roll that beautiful golden brown color. And I can tell you guys, as soon as we put these in the oven, they start filling the house with that amazing bread smell. There's nothing like it. Gets my kids really excited. They all flock to the kitchen anytime they smell bread baking, and these are one of the best smells ever. Now, obviously, I put one one batch of dinner rolls in the oven at a time, and the recipe says for about 15 minutes. I usually set my timer for about 12 minutes because I have found with my oven, these are done at 12 minutes, maybe 13 minutes. If I go any longer than that, they end up burning. You know they're finished when they're lightly brown on top and on bottom, and they've been in the oven for about 12, 13 minutes. For my oven, again, the recipe says 15, so maybe after about 11 minutes, start watching them. But these, when they're finished, and I've allowed them to fully cool down to room temperature because they're very hot when they first come out, I ended up hiding these from my kids because they literally will stand there and try to eat all of them. They want to eat them for snack, they want to eat them for breakfast. And eating that much bread obviously is not healthy in the first place, but I specifically wanted these to be used for Thanksgiving parties and get togethers. Because I was so grateful for their help, I did want them to be able to enjoy their hard work as well. They worked really hard on helping me roll these out, so I wanted to make sure that they got their fair share and got to enjoy a roll too. And of course, if you're the one standing in the kitchen all day, it is your job to be the taste tester to make sure that everything turned out just fine. And believe me, these did. These tasted fantastic, and I was really excited to share them with my friends.
It's the end of the day, and I finished about 38 yeast rolls. So we were able to cook all of these. I started counting and thinking in my head, though, of how many people are going to be at the Friendsgiving tomorrow. And I think I'm going to end up having to take most of these. So I will have to do a second batch on another cooking day later this week, which I plan to be doing anyway. So we'll just add that to the list of things we need to get done. But these turned out great. We made a lot of them. Time to move on to the next day. Hey everybody, it is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, so we're getting closer. We're going to get started on our second baking day. The last time we were together was on Saturday. So now today my goal is to get our cheesecake bites done, and I'm hoping to get our chocolate oatmeal cookies done as well. Though I will say I totally forgot to get these, which are little mini cupcake holders for the cheesecake bites. So I just got back from running out to grab those, and we're about to get started.
This cheesecake bite project ended up taking a lot longer than I expected for it to. So we ended up taking about 3 hours to fulfill this project, and that was definitely longer than planned. However, the cheesecake bites turned out fantastic. Starting off, I want to get started with the crust because I want that to be able to cool in the refrigerator while we mix the inside of the cheesecake, the actual cheesecake part. Hoping to make 3 different kinds of cheesecake or cheesecake bites so that everybody can have a chance to try different ones if they want and maybe like a different flavor. I'm going to do original cheesecake bites, strawberry cheesecake bites, and Oreo cheesecake bites. And the Oreo ones are by far my favorite, but I love anything Oreo. We're going to get started with the graham cracker crumb crust first for the cheesecake bites as well as the strawberry cheesecake bites. This is where I am attempting to use this device. I had never tried it before. In the past, I would always put graham crackers in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag and then just bang it until it became crumbs. So if you don't have a blender, if you don't have anything other than a Ziploc baggie, you can do that. It does take a little bit of effort and you need to find something heavy to kind of help you bang it. But I tried this device and it was a flop. It ended up being a lot more work and hassle than it was worth. So instead of doing this device or even a Ziploc baggie, I went straight to the blender and it turned out a lot easier than any of the other options. I was afraid it would make it more of a powder, but it didn't. It turned out perfect. So I definitely use this for the rest of the day. And after we crumble these into almost not sand because that's almost too fine. You want it a little bit more, what's the right word? You want it a little bit more crumbly than sand. So once you have that consistency or whatever consistency and texture that you like for your crust, then it is time to heat up the butter. And I do this slowly by putting a stick of butter in the microwave for 20 seconds at a time until it's fully melted. Once I have my graham cracker crumbs, I pour it all into a bowl and I have my melted butter ready to go. But I like to add a little extra something to my pie crust, and this wasn't in the recipe. I do have a recipe that I kind of went by that I will put down in the description. But just to add a little bit of extra flavor, I added a little bit of brown sugar as well as cinnamon to the graham cracker crumbs before putting the butter in. Once I put that in, I just kind of sprinkled it on top. I didn't measure it. And I poured the melted butter all over it. And then you can either use your hands or a spoon or however you want, but you want to try to mix the butter up through the graham cracker crumbs. And then you're ready to separate it into the tin, whatever it is that you're using, pie tin, muffin tin, mini muffin tin, it doesn't matter. But I noticed when I was mixing this that it still was not moist enough. It was still pretty dry after mixing it all up. And you want it to be the consistency of when you were to grab like a handful with your hand and kind of pinch it, it stays that shape. And obviously I just showed you, I picked it up. It's still very kind of more of a sand texture where you can kind of just sprinkle it, and that's not what I want. So what I decided to do was melt another stick of butter. You can always add more butter, but you can't take it out. So I figured I would add more until I got the consistency that I wanted. That way we were able to get it nice and a little bit thicker. So when you grab it and kind of squeeze it, it holds that shape. I wasn't planning on using muffin liners, the little mini muffin liners. I was just going to put them in the muffin tin, and then somebody was like, it might be a little bit easier to get them out without them breaking if you try this. And I totally hadn't even thought about that. So I had planned to get them from the store and forgot to add them to my list when I had that thought in that conversation. And so I ended up having to make that run back, which was slightly frustrating, but we got it done and we were able to get on a roll. Now that I have my muffin cup liners in the muffin tin, and I did find these, I looked at 2 different stores. One didn't have them, but Walmart does have these. They just don't have a variety of colors. But once I got them in there, I sprayed them lightly with nonstick spray. I have my crust now is able to stay crumbly and put together how I like. And we are going to put them in the liners. That bottle that I just showed you is cayenne pepper, but it is the perfect size for a mini muffin tin. I was going to buy a device that allows you to kind of stamp these down. However, I didn't want to have to spend the money on a kitchen gadget that I maybe use once a year and never use again. So I decided to see if I could find something in my house, clean it really well, and use that instead to stamp it down. And it worked like a charm. It was perfect. I was able to save money. And I find kitchen devices are only useful and good if you can use them multiple times, like many times, and otherwise it's not worth the investment. So this worked out perfect. It did exactly what I wanted it to do. By using the bottom of the bottle, it pushed the graham cracker crumbs down and made that nice layer of crust on the bottom. I placed the trays with the crust in them in the refrigerator so that they could chill and the crust could kind of harden and solidify. That way, when we go to put our cream cheese or cheesecake mixture in them, they don't stick to it, and it's easier to get the cheesecake mixture to stay versus it all getting somehow mixed up. So now we're moving on to the cheesecake center, the actual mixture. And the recipe calls for 2 8 ounces, so a total of 16 ounces. To get the double batch, I decided I didn't want to completely double it because that just seemed like a lot. And what I ended up doing was perfect. I did one batch and then a half of another batch. Again, I will put this recipe down in the description below, but the recipe calls for 16 ounces of brick style cream cheese. I did 16 plus 8 ounces, and then 1 cup of powdered sugar. I did 1.5 cups of powdered sugar. It calls for 2 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. I did 3. It calls for 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. I did 1.5. And then it also calls for 1.5 cups of cold, heavy whipping cream. Instead of doing the whipping cream and turning the whipping cream into whipped cream, I just went ahead and bought whipped cream and folded it in using that. This is what the mixture looks like before I add in and fold in the whipping cream, but you can tell that it still needs to be incorporated and I need to mix it for a little bit longer. So we'll let this mix while we go ahead and get started on our syrup, which is the strawberry syrup. I have quite a few bags of frozen strawberries that we like to use for smoothies, but this is perfect use for them as well. I just grabbed one that we already partially had used and went ahead and put it in a pot on the stove and started warming that up and melting it. Now that our whipped cream or the cream cheese mixture is all mixed and incorporated together, it's time to fold the whipped cream into the mixture. So we hadn't done that yet. I'm about to fold it in, and instead of mixing it in, I just want to gently fold it until it's for the most part incorporated, and it makes it nice, light, and fluffy. Once I got my cream cheese, the whipped cream folded into the cream cheese mixture, I noticed that my sauce, my strawberry sauce, or whatever you want to call it, was starting to kind of melt down, and I wanted to add my sugar in there to make it that syrupy texture. I don't want it too liquidy, so that means that I have to add either a gelatin or sugar to try to thicken it up some. I do end up blending this as well to make it more of a smooth mixture. While I'm waiting for the syrup to come up to a boil, I go ahead and get started on putting my cheesecake mixture into the little cupcake mini crusts that we just pulled back out of the refrigerator. And I keep a close eye on my syrup because I don't want it to scorch, so I make sure I stir it pretty frequently. But this side is going to be the original on the right, and the left are going to be the strawberry ones. So the original batch, I go ahead and put that tray back into the fridge, and I fill up the rest of the tray on what's going to be the strawberry ones. I take my syrup off the stove after it comes up to a boil. I think I added about a cup of sugar, which sounds like a lot, but this is a dessert, and typically there's more than that in jam. So I know that I'm going to end up freezing these, but am trying to figure out the best way to add the strawberry mixture. I do a test run because I really would love for it to be a swirl look, but it didn't look that way. It didn't turn out that way. So I went to plan B and I just did a little crater in the center and added a little dollop in each one and that turned out beautiful. They look a lot neater, a lot prettier than what my attempt at a swirl looked like. So that's fine as long as they turn out great and they taste fine. And my husband did a taste test and he gave me a thumbs up, so we were good to go. This is the rest of the pie crust, or the little mini cheesecake crusts filling, and I didn't want it to go to waste. I ended up making way more than I needed to, so I decided to make a pie with whatever filling and crust I had left over, and either we can eat it at Thanksgiving or we can just save it for another day because it will stay in the freezer until we need it. So I used the rest of the pie crust filling, and I went ahead and added a little bit more butter just to make sure it stuck well. I will say this was not the prettiest pie, but again, I'm glad I didn't have to throw any of this out or for it to go to waste. We were able to eat it and it still looks and tastes fine for what we need it for. I was also slightly frustrated with myself after doing all of the cheesecake bites. I realized I could have used my cupcake icing kit that I had gotten last year for Christmas, and I really had been wanting to use it, and it just did not cross my mind that I could have used it for this, and they probably would have turned out a lot prettier than they did. They turned out fine and they look good, they taste good, but they could have been even better. And now I remember for next time, it probably would go a lot faster trying to get the filling to actually stay in the cup holders too, or the mini cupcake holders. And so next year or next time I make these, I would definitely like to try to use that and see if it works out better. Now, because we're switching gears and instead of doing the strawberry ones, it's time to get started on the Oreo ones. And so to do that, I'm going to do the same thing with the crust, but this time it's going to be a little bit different. So instead of using graham crackers, I'm separating the icing out of Oreos into one bowl, and I'm putting the crackers into another to be crushed in the blender. And the crackers from the Oreo are going to be what becomes our crust. And I'm just going to add butter, melted butter to that. With the Oreo cheesecake bites, I don't want to add cinnamon or brown sugar. I just want the butter and the Oreo crackers. For the Oreo cheesecake bite filling, I'm doing something a little bit different. I am still following the recipe with most of the ingredients. The only difference that I did was instead of doing 2 cream cheese blocks, I only did 1, and I did all of the filling. I added all of the filling that I used from the Oreo crackers and added that instead of the second cream cheese block. And then on top of that, I took a handful, like a little cupful, or I believe it was about half a cup, I took and added it to the mixture so that it got that Oreo flavor in there rather than just having Oreos sprinkled on top or bottom. As I was mixing these, I realized that I needed my muffin tin back. And thankfully, the first batch, the original cheesecake bites that we put in there from the very beginning, were now frozen. So I got a different tray, took all of those out of the muffin tin and put them on the tray and put them back in the freezer so that they could stay frozen and fresh until we wanted them on Thanksgiving Day. And that way I could also use my muffin tin. I have 2 of these. They have been fantastic for multiple different reasons. I've used them many times since I bought them, and that's one of those things where, again, kitchen gadgets. Sometimes the kitchen stuff, you just sit it in a drawer, you forget about it, you never use it. Those are not worth the investment if you only use them like one time a year, unless it's just something super special for you. These I have used the muffin tin, the mini muffin tins, I've used so many times and gotten so many uses out of them. But for today, we are just doing all of the same things all over again. I'm putting the crust in the bottom, stamping them down. I put them in the fridge to let them chill for the crust, pulled them back out, put the Oreo cheesecake filling in them, and then to give them a pretty presentation, I broke an Oreo into fourths and just put them kind of sticking up in them. I was just trying to give them a pretty look. Now that the Oreo pie crust is chilled, we go ahead and put the Oreo filling on them to allow it to chill, and that way we, again, aren't wasting it. This was just leftover filling that I ended up not using for the mini cheesecakes. And then we also had a lot of leftover strawberry syrup, so I put it in a jar and put it in the fridge because people can either use that on the plain original cheesecake bites or we could use it on pancakes in the future. So I didn't want that to go to waste either. I'm just sprinkling the extra Oreo crumbs on top to give this, again, another texture and more flavor. And then put it back in the freezer, and we are done with all of the cheesecake bites.
It is the end of the day. We finished and got through all after school curricular activities. We did school pickup, we got through dinner. My kids are now in bed, but I still have one more recipe that I want to try to get finished and completed for today. I try to give myself goals every day, and this is one of those that I really want to try to get done today so that I can focus on other things tomorrow, and that is chocolate oatmeal cookies. I grew up on chocolate oatmeal cookies. If you have never had them, they don't look the most appetizing, but they are so, so good. I will say they are not very healthy. So if you're healthy conscious, this may not be the best recipe for you, but if you make them for your family, they are a huge hit. Everybody loves them. They are a little bit tricky because sometimes people like to say it depends on the weather, it depends on the humidity outside, on whether or not they actually come through and look decent at the end. So we will see. Last 2 times I made them, they did not set right. Other than that, before that, I had never had any problems. So we're gonna try. I got my normal cocoa. I got all of my normal ingredients. So I'm crossing my fingers and saying a little prayer that they're gonna turn out good today. This is also a gluten-free recipe. So this is a recipe that I do strongly recommend trying to get all of your ingredients ready, get as much ready as you can, because it's a very time sensitive one. We'll see how it goes, but let's go ahead and get started. So here I have a cup of peanut butter right here. I have 3 cups of oats with 1/4 teaspoon of salt mixed in. Now, typically I know this recipe and I know it has worked in the past, and so usually I only add about 2.5 cups of oats, and if I need the last half a cup later on, I can always add it. Not too later on, you just kind of watch to see how dry it's going to be, the consistency and texture of the cookie, and if it looks too wet, then I can add the other one in, but you can always add more in. You can't ever take it back out once you've added it. So usually I end up using about 2.5 cups, but I have my 3 here just in case I need it. And then I have 2 cups of sugar, and to the 2 cups of sugar, I'm gonna add a half a cup of milk. This is a very, I believe, Southern dish. This is something that a cookie and a treat slash Southern dessert that you will find a lot of times in the South. The chocolate oatmeal cookies, it has a lot of peanut butter in it. It is very sugary and sweet because you have cocoa and sugar, and obviously this is a good bit of sugar, but the taste is so, so good. So if you like peanut butter and chocolate, you're gonna like these. And this is something that you will win over at pretty much any party that you go to, as long as you can get it to, you know, dry right. That's the key. It calls for half a cup of butter, which is 1 stick of butter, and you can just plop it down in there. We're gonna end up putting this on the stove and melt it all down together. Before we do that, I have a couple more ingredients I need to add, but I also like to try to get my wax paper down before I actually start putting this on the stove and having to stand and babysit it. It doesn't take long at all for it to come up to a boil, and you have to stand there and kind of keep stirring it so it doesn't burn or scorch. Otherwise, the taste may be off and it may not set right. But you want to make sure you get your wax paper down ahead of time. You maybe could use parchment paper too. I've never tried it, but it's about the same idea. You just want to keep something that you can plop it down onto and peel off easily once it's dried. I have my cocoa powder here. The only thing I would say with cocoa powder, I know I'm a stickler for Aldi. I shop a lot of times at Aldi. They don't carry the Hershey's brand, at least mine doesn't. And so I have tried the Aldi brand before, and the taste was not good. It did not turn out right. I would not recommend the Aldi brand cocoa for these particular cookies. Definitely do the Hershey's brand, and your cookies will taste very sweet. They will turn out great. I made the mistake of trying it one time with the Aldi brand, and I will not do that again. but typically I absolutely love Aldi. All right, so I have 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. And you're just gonna plop that right in there. And I believe we're about ready to get started. The only thing I haven't actually poured out and gotten ready is my vanilla extract. If you have been with me for any length of time, you'll know that we make our own vanilla extract now. I used to buy it from the store. I think I still have a little bit from the store in the cabinet that I need to use up, but homemade vanilla extract, I'm telling you guys, is so good. So worth the effort. It was simple, not really any effort at all. It was way more bang for your buck. You get so much when you're having to pay like $5 to $10 for a super tiny little bottle from the store. This was not anywhere near that, and I got like 6 to 8 bottles out of one batch. So it was so worth it, and the taste is phenomenal. It adds definitely a lot more to it. So I'm gonna wait until the last minute just because these don't sit on the counter very well without pouring the vanilla extract out. We're gonna go ahead and put this on the stove, let it come up to a boil. Once it starts boiling, you wanna keep stirring it so it doesn't scorch, and let it boil for about a minute. You can reduce the heat a little bit, just keep it boiling for about a minute. Take it off the stove, and you're gonna dump the peanut butter in and the oats in and the vanilla extract, stir, and then plop onto the wax paper. I have my stovetop set to about medium-ish. It's on a 4, which is, I guess, medium-low-ish, but I want it to come up to a boil. I believe I might move it up to a 5 or 6. We'll see. I just don't want it to scorch, so I brought it up to a 6. We'll see how that goes. But this is a recipe that you don't want to walk away from, that you want to make sure once you start it, you want to be all in, try to focus, because the minute you walk away, this scorches and you have to start all over. That's why I chose to save this recipe for after my kids went to bed. It's just one that I can get done. The recipe itself takes about 5 minutes. It's such a fast recipe that this is such a good one that if you're in a hurry, that you can do quickly. It takes a few minutes for the cookies to harden once they're on the counter, but not super long. I would just let them fully cool before you try to box them up to take them anywhere. So that would probably be the longest part of the whole recipe. But overall, the actual cooking of the recipe takes literally 5 minutes. And it's just during that 5 minutes, you want to make sure that you're focused. I am going to give this a little bit of a stir because I know in the past, sometimes I'll forget to stir it and the sugar starts scorching before the milk or butter can melt to it. So by stirring it, you kind of get the sugar up off the bottom of the pot. This is pretty much what I had planned to do for today. I do have some other things that I will be cooking tomorrow that are just very classic items, like our ham. I might save the ham for Thursday morning, but I need to make macaroni and cheese. I need to do another batch of those rolls. There's a couple of other things that I would maybe look into doing as well. I am hosting Thanksgiving this year. However, a lot of my family is also bringing sides or a turkey or some main dishes as well, or some desserts. So I'm not having to cook all by myself. It's a good team effort. And I'm also excited because I believe everybody's going to be coming early so that we can have family time and just enjoy and kind of cook together, which is, it's been a long time since we've done something like that. So I'm really looking forward to it. If you have Thanksgiving traditions or a Thanksgiving favorite dish and recipe, put it down in the comments below. I would love for you to share because I know this will definitely not be the last time that we host Thanksgiving, and I would love to have some ideas of things that you guys absolutely love and can't live without on either tradition or recipe for your Thanksgiving day. I know you can't see it, but I also have all of my other ingredients sitting right off to the side here. I went ahead and moved everything I needed over. So I have the vanilla extract, the salt and oats, and the peanut butter. That way, once this does come to a boil, I can quickly move it off the stove and add everything right away. And then start dolloping it onto the wax paper, which I already also have out. The smell of chocolate cooking is so good. This smells fantastic. I do keep stirring, but every once in a while I want to pause to see if I start seeing bubbles, because once I start seeing bubbles, I'll start my timer for 1 minute. And if you keep stirring, sometimes it's hard to see. We're getting close though, because everything is nice and incorporated and melted, and all you see is chocolatey goodness. So now we're just waiting for it to start boiling. Look how pretty. Oh my goodness, that looks so pretty. Because this is such a temperamental recipe, I would not recommend doubling it. Oh, it's boiling, so we're gonna start our timer for 1 minute, and I'm gonna keep stirring it. But because this recipe is so temperamental, I would not recommend doubling it. I would do one batch and then do another batch separately. So if you need more than just one batch of cookies, I would recommend doing them at separate times. So I'm gonna kind of turn the heat down a little bit, and it should keep boiling, and we're gonna let it boil for a minute, and then I'll dump all of my ingredients in. Now it's time to take it off and add all of the ingredients real quick. A little. Okay, now I'm just gonna kind of stir it all, make sure all of the oats is covered with the chocolate, because that is how they will cook the oats to make them nice and soft in the cookies. And I ended up accidentally adding all of them, so hopefully it doesn't dry them out, but time will tell.
After checking the cookies the next day, they did end up being a little bit drier because instead of adding 2.5 cups of oats, I added the full 3, and I had planned to leave out half of them, but they still tasted great, even though they were a little bit crumblier than I would have liked for them to have been. We have a good jump start on Thanksgiving. I was able to get all of the recipes done on my to-do list for Saturday and today. I do have a few more recipes that I need to bake tomorrow as well as cook on the day of, but by doing it in stages, it allows me to have that much more time that I get to spend with family on the day of Thanksgiving, and that's the whole point. I'm excited to have family here and get to spend that quality time with them, and I don't want to have to be stressed about getting the house cleaned or food baked. So tomorrow I will be cleaning and deep cleaning the best I can while still baking a few different things. But I just want to take this time to say thank you so much for joining me here at Autumn Leigh at Home. On this day of Thanksgiving, I want to say thank you to you. By you spending this time with me, it's just such great community, and I hope to encourage one another. So please continue to comment, like, subscribe, share, all of the above. I appreciate you and thank you for being here. I hope to see you guys next time. And that is a